Hello, welcome to my presentation on electrical apprenticeship trends within merit shops, primarily using merit shops versus union or versus the combination because they have wildly different methods for teaching apprentices. For how apprentices are treated, how they're paid, the schedule they have varies widely. Um, when it comes to trends, with any field, you need to consider trends. But with construction, it's especially important because there's lots of things we take for granted that occur every day that we need trades for. This is kind of a root cause analysis, trying to look at why your first, second, third year apprentices are apprentices and why what they like about the work they're doing, what causes them concerns, what concerns can actually topple them over to the edge to the point they move to a different career path. When it comes to the merit shop schools, we pretty much have two primary ones. We have the ABC and the IEC. I graduated out of the ABC. I know a bunch of people graduated out of the IEC. They're the largest schools in America for merit shop based work. The study's purpose, we are trying to not jump to a conclusion. I spoke with a recent colleague and asked him about why he thought apprentices had such a high turnover rate, and he thought it was money. He believed that the only reason this occurred was for money, and I think that falls into a fallacy. There's a bunch of other issues that can cause people to leave, whether it's a bad schedule, bad work life balance, whether they're not a fan of being on call 24/7, whether they have safety concerns. I know when I was an apprentice, I had multiple times where I wanted to quit, and I was actively pursuing and in communication with other career paths. As a second year, I considered joining nursing school, which I know is very different than construction, but that's something that we need to consider. There are a plethora of options out there. What is attracting them to this field, and what is them pulling them away? Um, I know that safety has been a big concern. You have some companies that entirely neglect it, some companies that make it something very, very important, and that is something to consider. Definitely with OSHA not having the funding it had 30 years ago, you were more reliant upon independent contractors and state authorities to try and quell any safety issues. In terms of significance, we rely on electricians every day. We rely on construction workers every day. So even the most minor change in a trend has significant impact on whether you can get your power restored today or a week from now. Whether the commute to your work is really nice or whether there's a traffic jam because there's no lights on the road and two people rear end each other. So we are in a pickle of we have a worker shortage, and currently the trends don't seem to indicate that that shortage is going to go away. So we need to look at the baseline, the base of why this trend is not optimal for the construction field. And when it comes to apprentice turnover, if you have a 30-year apprentice leave, that's 3 years of training that you just lost as an employer, and you have to bring in a first year to try and train them up to that point and hope that they go past that 30-year point and they get their license. That's something to consider is that there's a lot of money invested in these people, and due to some anti-poaching things between the IEC, ABC, and the union, if you lose a third year, it's very hard to get another third year to replace it. You kind of just have to go back to getting another first year. So there's lots of sunk cost associated that will get passed on to the customer. Will get passed on to the standard homeowner, the commercial builder, all that stuff will have increased cost because of this constraint. We have a plethora of questions. I've kind of already pointed out some of them, but one of them that I haven't really pointed out is recruitment. Recruitment is difficult for this trade because you have a higher average age than if you were to go to somebody for the Marine Corps or go to somebody for college. The average age tends to be over 30 years old of an apprentice. which leads to other issues. It can that demographic shift from a standard student uh, causes changes in the trend and that need to be accounted for. Um, the primary method of getting this information is to use a survey, but hopefully, with the partnership of headmasters of the ABC and of the IEC, to get a survey at least going over a 2 year period. So we can see the average for what a first year class will think, and then the average for that first year class now is a second year. With many more months under the belt, has their opinion changed? Have they seen some things that has caused them to lose some degree of confidence? Kind of using it as a confidence gauge per se to figure out how uh, the to figure out where the chance of them leaving really spikes. This can be, of course, first addressing the demographic issues, but then going into how safe they feel. Have they seen a safety incident? Was that safety incident dealt with in what they believe to be a proper way? Do they believe they're being paid properly for the level of work? All of these things go back to addressing our questions of why is this bottom line trend having an issue? Why are we turning over apprentices at an outstandingly high rate? So when it does come to the literature review and looking over it, it is something to bear in mind that apprenticeships is a very, very old system. Thousands of years. We adopted ours from the British system, which adopted theirs from the guild systems. Um, Essentially, parents would sign 14 to 17-year-old boys to a master who kind of act as a father figure for them. This was pretty much a servitude. And through time, that became illegal. Through time, you also had the funding of more schools. Uh, the first schools to be really funded were union-backed schools until GE came out and actually created their own independent school. And they have the Fitzgerald Act, which helped to set some standards for apprentices and reduce the skill gaps that can occur from one school to the next school. Uh, that's something to point out when it comes to history is that apprenticeships are meant to be modular. They're meant to change with time. It is wrong to think of them as okay, it's a 4 year program that takes this amount of hours and this amount of on job training. We need to think about it more as a okay, what is the actual best method to train these people, and what is the most practical method to train these people, rather than getting stuck in the past. Because with newer technology, definitely post COVID, there's lots of changes to things like education systems. When it comes to the trends, there are lots of apprenticeship programs or schools. Most of them only have one participant, but the three major ones are the ABC, the IEC, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which is the union. But merit shop makes up most of the actual work that gets done. Apprenticeships have a problem, at least what I believe to be a problem, and could be causing some of these further issues of being very decentralized, focused on the state. What this means is a state like Indiana, a state like Kentucky, will have different training styles for their apprentices. They'll use different code books for their apprentices, different code cycles. So Indiana will be on 2008, and Kentucky will be on 2020, which creates a huge gap in the level of knowledge and that these people have. Because 12 years might not sound like a lot, but it is huge when it comes to the amount of technology that came out during that period of time. You only have 0.3% of the workforce actively trying to learn a trade. That is abysmally low, definitely when you consider that your completion rate is only about 35%, and it's even lower for minorities. So it's clear that there might be a different reason for minorities leaving than the standard population. When whether that's stigma, whether that's pay, whether that's other opportunities elsewhere. It's something to consider in that field is that we're losing a lot of participants that go through the training, which is costing a lot of money. Um, and when these people do become licensed, when these people do go about their daily trade activities, you have a 15% turnover, which is some of the highest of any sector in the markets. 15% turnover is quite insane. And it is something to also bear in mind. Is this carryover effect from their education? Is this something that wasn't addressed in their education? Is this stress buildup? Is this burnout from years of doing this that could have been mitigated from the very start? There's lots of reasons that these things can occur. One that was noted, particularly in literature, was that you have instructors that aren't well trained. Instructors that tend to read off slideshows or read off the textbook, and they're not really given the freedom to take what the class is learning and to implement it. And part of this level of freedom is funding. I know with the ABC, when I joined the ABC, we had just received a grant from the Indiana government under Mike Pence that dramatically changed the curriculum because we finally had money to be able to have wiring rigs where people, rather than just reading a textbook, could actually go and wire using a schematic or line drawing. There's that level of funding is very much needed and somewhat avoided because tuition rates have to stay low because apprenticeships, the apprentice normally ends up flipping the bill for the schooling. Um, yeah, you have the higher average age, which also changes the demographics and changes how you need to cater to them. A person who's 30 years old versus a person who's 18, you can have a different degree of other factors pulling. 30-year-old is probably going to care a little bit more about work-life balance. Maybe care about being able to purchase a home or being able to pay off their home, um, being able to pay down debts, and things like pay rates and things like constantly being on call are going to have a negative impact on that. So all in all, there's lots of things that happen in trades that we take for granted. That when we flip a light switch, when we turn on a faucet, when we have a heated house, we take these things for granted, and we really shouldn't. We should consider the path that they are going on, and how do we make that better? How do we make it so when we call up for we need service on our heating unit, that we can get electricians, we can get HVAC guys, not next week, but tomorrow. Um, and how do we make it so our roads are nice and clear, and that we can get to work on time, that we can get our groceries at low cost? And the best way of doing that is to ensure that trades are treated fairly and that we reduce the stigma and we go by and we see these safety concerns. We notice these pay gap issues and we rectify them. Yeah, there's lots of cost associated with turnover and cost that is being passed on to customers. We can avoid that. We can reduce that. We can make it so that standard livelihood doesn't have to increase in cost as these trends increase. And this is kind of the first root cause analysis, first research draft of how we can do that. So I want to thank you and anybody else for watching this little presentation. I know people might have questions, people might have comments, people might have concerns. You, of course, can reach out at the email provided, nicholas.t.dumbo@gmail.com, and I'll try to make sure to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and have a nice evening.